Welcome back to Winners and Losers, ladies and gentlemen. Today, joining me is none other than Michael McCubbin. How are you doing, my friend?
Not great, if I'm honest. My first Winners and Losers in probably about 2 years. And it comes after one of Man United's worst ever defeats. And I'm sharing the camera with you, Zach, who must be delighted with Chelsea's 7-0 win. So yeah, not great at all in that sense. Otherwise, I'm all right. I'm keeping well. I had a good weekend other than that shocking performance yesterday. What about yourself, Zach?
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, we'll get on to United in a second, and we'll also get on to Chelsea as well. Apart from that, a decent little weekend. Should be said, Chris is out in Abu Dhabi, enjoying himself for a couple of weekends, or weeks, I should say. And Joe is moving into his new place, so wish him good luck. But enough of that. Let's move on to Manchester United. He suffered their most embarrassing defeat to Liverpool in the Premier League era, losing 5-0 at Old Trafford. Now, the game may as well have been over after just 5 minutes, to be quite honest, when Naby Keita, aided by some seriously woeful defending, really bad, kicked off the demolition. Maguire and Shaw were then at fault as Trent Alexander-Arnold put in the ball for Jota to score the second. And then it was about Mohamed Salah, who bagged 3 between the 38th and the 50th minute. He became the first opposition player to score a hat-trick at Old Trafford in Premier League history, and the first player in any competition since Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, in 2003. The Egyptian now has 15 goals and 5 assists in 12 Premier League and Champions League games this season, which is quite frankly ridiculous. And he's averaging a goal involvement every 53 minutes. We've said it once, we'll say it again. Right now, in current form, he's the best player in the world. Now, he was also in supreme form during this game as well, as you can tell by scoring a hat-trick. He had 59 touches, more than anyone at United, bar Fred. 7 shots, 2 chances created, and a 94% pass accuracy. He was unbelievable. Watching him at the moment, it just feels like a guarantee that he's going to score or create or do something in some way that will be very impressive. But Liverpool, though, it has to be said, were super clinical. They scored 5 from 8 shots on target, but they were well worth the big victory. They generated an expected goals of 4.05 to United's 1.36. The Reds have won by 3 or more goals in 5 of their 9 Premier League games this season, keeping a clean sheet in each of those games as well. So it was obviously very impressive by Liverpool, I should say. But Mikey, from a United fan's point of view, and obviously as United, how bad were they?
I mean, it was nothing short of a disgrace, was it? I mean, wasn't it? I'm still kind of dumbfounded at what we saw yesterday from United, from a defensive perspective, especially. I mean, Liverpool have been superb this season. There's no getting around that. But they didn't have to perform that well to beat United. We'll get onto the Chelsea Norwich game after this. But like I was speaking to my Norwich supporting friend yesterday, and I was saying I genuinely think that Liverpool had to work less hard for that victory. Liverpool had to work less hard for the victory yesterday than Chelsea did for their victory over Norwich, which is really saying something about the state of Man United's defensive structure, their structure all over the pitch. Despite having 36% of the ball, they somehow made fewer tackles and interceptions than Liverpool. They made 16, Liverpool made 21. So it just goes to show which team was working harder, even from a defensive perspective, despite Liverpool having so much of the ball. As a team, they only attempted 7 tackles all game. Liverpool attempted 22. Fred made 0 tackles and 1 interception all game. And that's not to scapegoat Fred there. Like, he was given far too much to do, him and McTominay. I know they've come in for a lot of flack as a midfield pairing, especially in the last few weeks. But when you've got a forward line which is, in a completely disorganised press and then not dropping back to help out, and you've got that very combative Liverpool 3-man midfield who are pushing up, and then you've got the fullbacks also pushing up as well. There's not really much you can do as a midfield pairing, especially one with the limitations of Fred and McTominay. So I don't want to scapegoat them. It was a complete disaster all over the pitch. We've already spoken about Maguire and Shaw, and Wan-Bissaka and their individual mistakes. But ultimately, this was a total kind of structural disaster from a Man United point of view. And the stats are indicative of what was a totally disjointed performance. They hardly got near their opponents at all. The pressing, like I said, completely disorganised. The backline was completely open to exploitation on countless occasions. Even Marcus Rashford, basically setting up Mo Salah for a chance in the first half from inside the Liverpool half. So it really wasn't good enough at all. On top of that, key players lost their heads. Ronaldo, quite fortunate to stay on the pitch, I think, after kicking out at Curtis Jones. Obviously, he got the ball technically, but that was dangerous play. Paul Pogba then sent off 16 minutes after coming on for a horror challenge on Naby Keita, set up by himself, not really knowing what situation he was in, and then suddenly going in for the lunge. Not good enough from two of the senior players on the side. They now have the 5th worst defensive record in the league. They rank 14th for shots faced, rank bottom for tackles. We've got the 15th worst defensive record according to XG against now. We've now made more errors leading to shots than any other side in the league. It was just from back to front, just completely humiliating. And we've been seeing United performances in the last few weeks, and they've not been good enough at all. The first half against Atalanta was awful. The second half against Leicester, awful. They were both similar kind of performances to the one we saw in the first half against Liverpool, in terms of kind of abandoning the mid to deep block, pressing but without any real organisation. Ultimately, there are big questions to be asked of the coaching and the management in terms of that. But when I was watching this yesterday, I just could not remember a time I felt I've seen this team humiliated more. If I'm honest, I think this is worse than the 6-1 against City. I think this is definitely worse than the 6-1 against Tottenham last year. I think both those results arose in different contexts, and this context is far more damning, I think, after a summer that United have had in terms of buying three absolute superstars, in terms of the performances in recent weeks and the seeming inability for the side to turn it around or even change something up. It's particularly damning, and I think Ole has a lot to answer for here in terms of sticking with a formula which is clearly a losing formula, and doing so against one of the best sides in the world. I think from the word go, from that fourth minute opener, United were just there to be slaughtered, and there was no way out of it, and it was utterly humiliating. It was no surprise that Harry Maguire apologised to the fans after the game. Solskjaer took full responsibility for the defeat. Here's what they had to say.
Well, first and foremost, apologies to the fans. It's nowhere near good enough for this club. We're all disappointed. We spoke in the dressing room. Obviously, I'm here because I have to be here. But only real thing I've got to say is we apologise to the fans. It's nowhere near good enough. They stuck right with us, even coming off the pitch at 5-0 in the end. They're singing, and we appreciate that. But for us, as a club, we've got to do better.
Do you and the coaching staff accept responsibility for the performance and the tactics as well?
It's mine. That's it. The coaching staff, they're very, very good, brilliant, and I choose the way we approach the game. So, and today we weren't clinical enough going forward. There was spaces for both teams, and when you give good players spaces, they score.
To me, it looks like a dead man walking there in Ole's interview. I think there's been a lot of questions, obviously, after this defeat, and so there should be, especially after what happened with Leicester and how it went with Atalanta, about should he be sacked, will he be sacked, what needs to happen now from Manchester United's point of view. I think we also spoke yesterday on Sunday Vibes, essentially about this, about the kind of what should happen next, who should they go for, yesterday. So if you haven't checked that out on Sunday Vibes. I will, if I'm being honest, if Ole can survive this, he'll survive to the rest of the season. I can't quite believe that maybe a board can look at what's happened here and say that okay, we'll give him more time, especially when the next couple of games they're not obviously going to be 5-0 bad, but they could still be bad and losses. And during this point of the season, you could use it as a trigger point to kind of change your fortunes by bringing in another manager. But that's the only thing that I think Ole might have on his side, is that, okay, out there right now is Conte, who United may not want to work with based on his kind of track record with obviously how things normally end at a club, and how it's quite a different manager compared to what they have right now. And will he be using the youth that United have? It's a good question. And maybe Zinedine Zidane. Again, I don't know whether Zinedine Zidane would join Manchester United. I think United need a different manager, more of a tactical manager than a man manager. So yeah, if I don't see it, and Ole's been let go by United over the next coming days, I just don't think it will happen. I really don't, until the end of the season, when United can then look at their whole, what's next after him. I mean, look, McCubbin, you're a Manchester United fan. I think you've also, during Ole's tenure, been quite happy with him and what he's done throughout those 3 years now. How do you feel about this situation? Yeah,
first of all, I must acknowledge the fact that I feel like a decent chunk of you watching this today will have come here today for a Joe rant. So I hope I at least did some justice to the situation. I'm not a natural ranter, but I mean, look, I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I've never been fully behind him in the way that a lot of United fans have been. There's always been a bit of scepticism from myself in terms of where I thought he could take us. I never really thought, aside from about a 2-3 week period last year, that he would be able to deliver a Premier League title. Nevertheless, I think he's done a better job than any manager since Ferguson. I think that as well, the transfer policy's been at its best since he's been at the club. I think in terms of the coaching structure and the rest of it, I think the club has made the most progress since then, as well as on the field. So I think, you do have to give him credit for that. Nevertheless, I think what we've seen in the last few weeks is a manager who really, I feel like this is as far as he can take the club. If after 3 years, this side is still going through these really terrible batches of form, and the kind of form that loses you titles, and in this case could even lose United a guaranteed Champions League spot, which is obviously a huge worry for the ownership. I kind of feel like it's the end of the road, personally. That's my feelings, not towards Ole personally, but like that's how I feel in terms of what what is required of a Manchester United manager, and especially one who's had over £450 million ploughed into the side in his tenure. I think this season was always going to be the season of judgment for him, and so far, the results and the performances in particular have been far from good. I mean, and he'll be hurting about that, obviously. Like, this is a Man United, club legend who's been at the club, associated with the club for the last 25 years, and he's overseen one of the club's worst ever defeats. I think this is only like the 7th time they've lost by 5 goals at Old Trafford in their history. It's really, really very poor. But I think I'm kind of with you, Zach. Firstly, I don't think he's going to get sacked this week. Maybe not next week or the week after even. But I think this result and recent performances, I think have been probably a trigger. I reckon, for the ownership to now be looking at the next step, and I think now is the time that they will be looking into sounding out other managers potentially in the background and making moves to see what happens next, because I think from here on in it's unlikely that United can get back into the title race. Obviously, I mean, they're only 8 points off, but nevertheless, unless Solskjaer really changes things up tactically, which I think he has to do, and starts getting instant results from it. I mean, it's Man City in 2 weeks' time. There could be another. I mean, there could be another trouncing. I don't see United at this stage getting anywhere near the top 3. I think even if Ole wins, the League Cup, out of the League Cup, sorry, even if Ole wins the FA Cup, don't see us winning the Champions League. I still think that there are serious questions to be asked in terms of the investment that's going into the club and where the club is going. It could be, it could be in 3 weeks' time, it could be at the end of the season, but I think there will now be movements towards seeing where the club can go from here. And you talk about Conte, talk about Zidane, those are the two front runners, of course. Joe talks about Erik ten Hag on Friday. Personally, I think I'm kind of with him. I think Erik ten Hag would be the ideal man, but obviously whether you can get him out of Ajax is another matter. Obviously there are question marks over him making that kind of big step up, at least to a club with the kind of pressure that comes with the Man United job. It's a bit of a poison chalice for many coaches. So I think personally this was the kind of day of reckoning for Ole, and it's difficult to see him lasting beyond the end of the season now. But enough from us. Here's what Jamie Carragher had to say about it yesterday.
This thing of asking for managers to be sacked, I'm not comfortable with saying that word sack, someone should go. But when we talk about Manchester United as a team, we're comfortable by saying Fred's not good enough or McTominay's not good enough and they need a new midfield player. So I don't feel too bad in terms of saying Manchester United need a better manager. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer isn't a manager for Manchester United. Now, he's done really well, but when you want someone to go to that next level or take them to a title or the Champions League, and that's not being disrespectful. As I said, as he said before, for 2 or 3 years, you've almost enjoyed what they've done, the players they've brought in, the players they've got out, getting better. But now you just said then, the big boys, and unfortunately, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will never be Jürgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola or Thomas Tuchel. It's staring you in the face.
Okay, enough talking about negativity in Manchester United. Let's get on to some positivity and Chelsea McCubbin. Why are we talking about Chelsea?
You should know why, everyone. 7-0 against Norwich at home on Saturday, extended their lead at the top of the Premier League by doing so. This was the 18th time Chelsea have scored 6+ goals in a Premier League match, more than any other side in the competition's history. The game also saw all English scorers as well. Hudson-Odoi, Chilwell, Reece James, Mason Mount obviously getting the hattie. Max Harrens with the own goal as well. First time Chelsea have had 4 English scorers in a game. Wow. And obviously Mount got the hat-trick for Chelsea. 20th different player to score a Premier League hat-trick for the Blues. Only Arsenal have more different hat-trick scorers in the competition. Lots of trivia for you there. But a totally dominant performance by the Blues. Zach, obviously Mason Mount, he's been he's not been an automatic starter in the last month at least. Obviously, otherwise he's been a key player for Chelsea over the last 2 years. What did you make of his performance on Saturday?
Unbelievable, to be quite honest. I think it has to be said as well, obviously one goal was a penalty that he had to retake, and the other goal was Ruben Loftus-Cheek essentially putting it, giving him an open goal from 5 yards out. But the first goal is taken really, really well. I mean, my only criticism about Mount has always been he needs to probably contribute more on the goal front. It's probably been the side of his game that's not quite been there yet, and that's for a young player who plays in his position that you kind of always think will come in time. And he said so. He said as much himself last week. He thought he needed to score a goal. Maybe that'll get him firing, and evidently it did. It got him onto a hat trick, but. You're right, he hasn't necessarily been featuring as much recently. I think that's a lot due to him having played so much football over the past 2 years for Chelsea and England, that sometimes he got to that period where things just weren't quite going for him, and he needed maybe a bit of a rest, and it seems to have worked pretty well. Yeah, I think right now Mason Mount is Chelsea's maybe not necessarily best player, because I think that could go to maybe N'Golo Kante when he's on the pitch, but one of the most important. I think you really notice when he's not playing for Chelsea. He adds so much in terms of not just an attacking sense, he adds so much defensively as well. I mean, in a game like this against Norwich, you need to have to do so much on that front. But in a game where a lot of people were questioning about obviously having no Romelu Lukaku, no Timo Werner, the front three of Kai Havertz, Mason Mount and Callum Hudson-Odoi proved to be okay, scoring or helping with 7 goals. But yeah, I absolutely think he's a star, and someone that, to be honest, I think there's talks about him getting a new contract, and he'd deserve it 100%.
Nice. And obviously we talk about the Chelsea defence as well. Didn't have awful lot to do in this game, did they? But 17 clean sheets now in the Premier League under Thomas Tuchel. In that time, Chelsea have only conceded 16 goals. So it just goes to show how solid that defence is. Obviously, Edouard Mendy, I feel like, has been getting a lot of praise recently. But I think it's a whole team effort, right, Zach? What have you made of the Chelsea back line this season? Obviously, Trevor Chalobah as well has been playing really well recently too.
No, I think it's been really, really good. I think the only game really where we kind of got a bit lucky was Brentford, and that all came down to Mendy being incredible in goal. I mean, when you play a back three, you're always going to have it a little bit easier. But I think some people have said, the only reason Chelsea don't score goals is because, they've got 5 at the back and all this stuff. And I don't quite believe that, because I think even though, yes, we're playing with an extra defender, we're still attacking. We're still an attacking side. We're not necessarily the pressing giants of, say, Man City and Liverpool, but it's more of a tactical press, waiting on certain trigger points to move forward and to put people under pressure. Look, you can't really complain. It seems to be anyone that steps into that defence, whether that is Trevor Chalobah, Christensen, Thiago Silva, whoever it may be. I mean, Malang Sarr, as I said, played against Brentford, seems to do the job pretty well. And so, I think this defence has been pretty good. But it has to be said, right, in this game against Norwich, they did not help themselves at all. If I'm being completely honest, I think this may have been one of the worst Premier League performances I've ever seen from a club. Just, there was nothing there. And it also didn't help himself with Gibson getting sent off for an unneeded challenge in the 65th minute. But whereas we talk about a pressing side in terms of Liverpool and Man City and how Manchester United weren't necessarily organised with theirs, Norwich's press was essentially non-existent at times. Sargent was very, very lazy up top. I think Mendy was only really troubled one time during this game, and he had to make a kind of sliding tackle for a save, and that came from a Chelsea mistake themselves. It also has to be said as well that Chelsea were really, really clinical, scoring 7 goals. They only had an XG of 2.3 plus a penalty plus an own goal. So maybe the scoreline slightly flattered them, but I'm worrying quite a bit for Norwich, if I'm being honest, Mikey, because I don't see them sacking their manager, Farke, but I think they need to if they want to have any chance of staying in the Premier League. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because Daniel Farke's been in there since 2017. He's been there for over 4 years now. His playing style and the club's recruitment policy has generally been pretty consistent. They're one of the most kind of sustainably top-run clubs in the league. They've done brilliantly at kind of unearthing, undervalued talents in Europe and the rest of it. But that hasn't translated to Premier League safety yet. Obviously, they were, one of the, they went down in 2020. They've won 2 championship titles though, especially last year. But obviously they lost Buendia in the summer, and so far no one has stepped up. And I think that's a big worry for them, that they don't have that talismanic presence like Buendia in the side. The thing is, I think with Daniel Farke, I think the ownership at Norwich could keep hold of him if they go down, but they'd have to. I mean, at least if I was in that position, I think you'd have to see some sign of progress. And so far this season, there hasn't been progress. Only 5 teams in Premier League history have had a worse record than Norwich after 8 games. Sheffield United last season, to be fair, one of them. But so far, we haven't seen that progress. At this point, the last time they were in the Prem, they'd already staged that shock victory over Man City.
Yeah.
Timu Pukki was on 5 goals. We haven't seen that so far from Norwich. And to be fair, they've had an awful start to the season, and I think that was a bit of a kiss of death for them. Liverpool on the opening day, playing a number of top teams in those opening weeks, and going through those games with kind of 0 points on the board. Obviously, heads are always going to drop no matter how good the opposition are, and I think that could be, a piece of bad fortune which could ultimately cost Farke his job, because I don't see how Norwich, finish the league bottom with a near record points, near record low points. and he keeps his job, to be honest. I feel like something has to give after, it will have been 5 years by the end of this season that he's been at the club. And if you can't stay up at the second attempt, and especially if you can't show that the team has made progress at the second attempt, then I feel like there's no coming back from that. But I agree with you, Zach. I think he'll probably be safe in the job for now. He said as much after the game that 7-0 against Chelsea is one of those results that can happen. It's not 7-0 against Burnley, is it? But nevertheless, I think there are going to be big questions asked at Norwich as the season goes on. Nevertheless, as well, they aren't completely out of it yet. They're still only 3 or 4 points off safety. That there is time to turn it around. Even when you've got this many points at the in the opening stage of the season, there is still time to turn it around. But they've got to turn it around quickly. And they've had one of the easier games of the season in Burnley just gone. So worrying times for Norwich. Let's move on to our losers. Our losers this week are none other than Everton, Zach. What went down at Goodison Park?
Yes, a former friend of Everton became a foe as Josh King scored a hat-trick to help Watford to a stunning victory and a first win under Claudio Ranieri as Everton lost 5-2 at Goodison Park. It was the club's first win at Goodison Park, this being Watford, in their 140-year history. Although Ranieri has now won his last 5 visits to Merseyside, so I'm pretty sure he enjoys it up there in Liverpool. The victory lifts the Hornets to 14th on 10 points, now just 4 points behind the Toffees in 8th. I mean, it is very still early on in the season, but that right now, where between 8th and essentially 20th, you can jump up so many places with just one win. It is ridiculous. Now, they've obviously bounced back from their 5-0 defeat to Liverpool last week. Ranieri's side took 20 shots to Everton's 15 and generated an XG of 3.1 to Everton's 1.8, so it's definitely a well-deserved victory. Now, it is quite the turnaround for a side which ranked bottom for shots in the league in going into this game. Everton looked in the driving seat following Richarlison's 63rd minute header, but a 4-goal flurry in the final 13 minutes turned the game onto its head. Now, key players on the day for Watford were Cucho Hernandez, I should say, who had 4 dribbles, created 5 chances. Emmanuel Dennis scored 1 and got 2 assists in just 11 minutes. And of course, Josh King scored a hat-trick against his former club, who he barely played for last season, with 6 shots and won 6 aerial duels. Now that is really, really impressive for Watford, a big turnaround, which, to be fair, I did not see coming at all. But Mikey, talk to me about Everton.
Yeah, I don't think anyone saw it until those final 15 minutes, did they? Exactly. It was pretty mad. This defeat just compounds some really poor recent form for Everton, and to see a player who didn't really get a chance at Goodison Park come back and get his revenge like that. Well, I say revenge. I don't think he felt like it was revenge necessarily, but nevertheless, show them what he was about. Would have been a pretty bitter pill to swallow for fans of the Toffees. They've won just one of their last 5 games now, having won 3 of their opening 4. They've been beaten 3 times on that run. They've scored 3 times and conceded 10 in that time as well. Really bad from the Rafa Benitez side. Obviously, 5 of those coming on Saturday. And it doesn't get any easier for them now. Between now and the end of November, they face Spurs, Man City and Liverpool. So some real tough challenges coming up for Benitez. I feel like this will really be the making of this team. They're struggling with key players out as well. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's obviously out. Doucouré's out. Mina, all big misses. So it could be a very long month ahead. Here's what Rafa Benitez had to say about their late collapse on Saturday.
You are winning 2-1 after a great effort, and the team was fine. So we have Richarlison, the fans were behind the team, so everything was positive. And then we made so many mistakes that we gave them the chance to score goals, and we lost the confidence and everything.
So there we have it. That is the end of today's winners and losers. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought of the games in the comments below. I'm sure we're going to be talking about Manchester United in there. And me and Mikey will try and reply to a few of your comments as well. McCubbin, what else is going on in the Football Daily cinematic universe?
Well, yeah, if you want to check out more kind of Man United, Solskjaer kind of stuff, I did a explained last week on whether Antonio Conte would be a good fit at Man United. So yeah, looking into his tactics, his man management, his history, and whether he'd be a good fit at United. So go and check that out. On the subject of Conte as well, there's an explained on EFD about the rise and fall of Juventus in the last decade.
Indeed, there you have it. Now, if you want to see more Football Daily content as well, we just said it, check it out. And click the subscribe button down below, like the video, all that good stuff. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye.